Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 5th episode of our Tandem Talks. We are just going to leave it a few more moments so that we can have some more time for the audience to join, because we're expecting quite a few people to join us today. Okay, wonderful. I think we're looking good. So hello everyone and welcome to the 5th episode of our Tandem Talks. So for those of you that are new to us today, our Tandem Talks is our monthly content webinar series where we invite thought leaders, business leaders and HR leaders to join us and share their expertise and their insights. So today we are very excited to be joined by internationally known thought leader, speaker and author Tamra Chandler, very well known for helping organisations and their people perform at their peak. So today, Tamra will be talking to us about performance management and feedback for our brave new world. So this is a 45-minute webinar. And after Tamra has presented, there'll be lots of time for some questions and answers. So please feel free to post in the chat and the Q&A. And I should let you know that this webinar is being recorded. So without further ado, I'm very excited to hand over to Tamra. So thank you.
Megan, thank you so much. And hello, everybody. I am talking to you from the West Coast of the United States. So it's morning here, but I'm guessing for many of you it's afternoon or maybe early evening. So hello all, and I hope you're having a great day. We are going to talk, I'm just going to hit you with some quick stuff on performance management and feedback, and then as Megan said, really open it up and Aisling and I can have a conversation about a lot of these elements. So I would love to take your questions and just get the dialogue rolling, but let me get started with just some things to get us going here. So let's start right off with a poll, because I'm curious when we think about performance management where you are, and we'll talk a little bit about why that question is so interesting, about where people are in their process of reimagining or rebooting, as I say, performance management. So Megan, you want to bring up the poll? So what's your perspective on your current performance management process? Love it? Few issues? Needs a reboot? Okay, we're seeing about 65% coming in as needs a reboot, about 32% in a few issues, and 3% as love it. That's a pretty common response to that question even today. And one of my funny stories about this was when I first was presenting on this back in 2015, I was at the Global SHRM conference, and I had about 1,400 people in the room, and all, of course, HR leaders, and I asked all of them that same question. But because we were live and in person, I said, well, everybody who loves their performance management process, please stand up. And we had 3 people stand up in the room of 1,400. The best part of that story is afterwards, when I was up at the podium and wrapping up and getting ready to leave, one of the gentlemen who stood up came up and said to me, hey, Tamra, I just wanted you to know I stood up because we don't have a performance management process. So that always has stuck with me. But what it really says is, despite all of our best intentions, despite all the work we've done to try to get this right, we still have struggled to really find it impactful and meaningful in a way that serves our people and serves our business. So here's a question for you. Poll number 2. If you haven't rebooted or there's something that's been holding you back, what is it? So here's the common things that we see. So Megan, let's bring up this other poll and see kind of what's holding people back at this point from that 65% rebooting, or even maybe the 30-some% who just needs to do some fixes on it. All right, people have their votes in. Yeah, okay. Number one, unclear how to determine rewards without ratings. That is the top, that is the top question and the top thing that is holding people back. And then number two, unsure, not sure our managers are ready to take it on. Well, if misery loves company at all, this group is very much connected to a lot of what we hear around the world. Although number three here is we're invested too much in the current process. That's interesting. Bosses will never buy it is usually number three, and that looks like it's in fourth place along with it's just too weird to walk away from tradition. So all valid challenges that we see people face around the world. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the statistics. So as I said, you're not alone. And this data, because I haven't been out speaking as much, is a little bit, it's last year's data. But if we look at last year's data, what we knew is about 72% of organizations are still looking for a reboot. So there were 65% on this call. That's pretty common. That's still what we're seeing, which is interesting given that this has been a conversation that we've been having for some time. And as I said, the top three issues are rewards without rating, manager trust, and usually executive support. Often that's kind of measured, connected with the investment in the process as well as the, the leadership support, the investment in the process. We don't want to step away from tradition. Oftentimes our leaders grew up with these traditional models, and so it worked for them. Look, they got to the leadership position. So why doesn't it work for everybody else? And so it's often hard to move those leaders forward. What's interesting is I started doing research on this years ago. I actually designed my own system when I was the chief people officer at Hitachi Consulting. It looked very traditional. And then fast forward later when I was a CEO and founder of People Firm, I got a call from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the CHR over there said, hey, Tamra, we think we want to do something different with performance management, and we want you to write us a white paper. And we want that white paper to answer this question: how is performance management driving performance? And I normally don't write white papers. That's not something I'm usually in the business of doing, but I was so intrigued by my own experience and by the question and wanting to, support our relationship with the foundation. I said, okay, let's go there. Let's do this. And at that time, what we found is, this was like 2014, 2013, 2014. People were starting to buzz and whisper about this performance management process isn't working. And then over the years, as we got into it, we just saw that it went from a whisper to a roar. Like everybody was saying, we need to reboot it. In 2015, 2016, Josh Bersin said, this is the year that everyone's going to change their performance management process. So why, fast forward to 6 years, 7 years later, are we still seeing the numbers that we're seeing? Well, it's those reasons you guys called out. It's the not sure how to manage rewards. We don't have our managers in a place that we really trust that they can manage a process that is less sort of rigorous. But what is interesting now is that we're seeing with the pandemic and with the way that a lot of us are working virtually, we no longer have a manager over our desk. A lot of the hierarchy has come down because we're kind of all on the same playing field. We've had a significant awakening in the social justice arena. We're really starting to see a lot more momentum, a lot more sort of thrust saying, look, we need to bust through the inertia that we've had because the processes that we've been managing in this traditional model, they didn't work before, but they really aren't working now. So we've been saying, it's time to reboot performance management, not despite everything that's going on, but really because of everything that's going on. We need frequency in the check-ins, particularly if we're virtually separated. We need to ensure everyone understands what work is important now, and that we can bring their fear down by providing that clarity. We need to ensure that their wellness is there, that they're able to survive and even thrive in the current environment that we're in. We need to modernize performance management because we have a lot of bias and concern in there. I've done some interesting research here, and we find that women and people of color do not fare well in traditional performance management. And a lot of the models that we're using just kind of bring in that inherent unconscious bias. And then finally, our reward strategies, which ties to that last element of why have we not moved forward, we need to actually step back and rethink our reward strategies. They really are not meeting the purpose of today. And if you go out and talk to your people, most of them will tell you, can we get real with rewards? We just need to step away from a lot of these ideas And as part of reimagining performance management, reimagine how we reward and recognize our people. So let's do our third poll here. When you're thinking about rebooting or addressing some of those issues you still would like to fix, what's most critical to you right now when you want to enhance your performance management process? It's a pretty powerful list, so probably hard to pick just one. How are we doing, Megan? We got results there? All right. Upping the quality of conversations. Oh, I love seeing that one. That's so important. All of these are important. Improving feedback. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Clarifying role and career growth. This is super, super important. And creating more flexibility and agility. Awesome. Yeah, all of those things are vital. And I think that number one, the quality of the conversations, all of that comes into it, right? If we improve the quality of conversations, if we're providing more clarity, if we're helping people understand where they stand, how they're doing, how you can help them grow in their own careers, all of that is like what this process is really should be about. So if we're going to fix performance management, we have to start with kind of understanding what we've had wrong in the traditional models. This is the first place I started when I got that call from the foundation. And you remember that their question was, how is performance management driving performance? And when we started sending over our drafts of the white paper way back then, they would come back and say to us, you know, Tamra, you still haven't really answered the question. And here's where we finally landed. What we know is this. We know that engagement is directly correlated, it's causal to performance. If our people are engaged, our organizations perform better. There is years of research that supports that. So if we could say that performance management was driving engagement, we could say it was driving performance. But the problem was when we looked at it, what we found is more often than not, performance management was actually driving disengagement. And for a lot of these reasons we can highlight here. And so we couldn't say it was actually driving performance. We could almost say it may be actually lowering performance. And as I've talked to so many clients around the world, you know, this is a common theme. One of my favorite clients said, we come out of a depression. It takes us like a few weeks to come out of our depression when we go through our annual process. So there's a lot that we're doing that we need to let go of because it's not driving the outcomes that we want. And that's sad because we've spent a lot of time and energy and effort and money and trying to get this right. So that fatal flaw number one, a theory without evidence, is just a bad theory. This is saying that we need to lean into what science tells us about human motivation and people, and we need to let go of a lot of those traditions and things that we grew up with that simply don't work, that they just don't hold water. So I don't have time to cover all 8 of these. We can come back and talk about them. Let me highlight a couple. Number 2, nobody opens up to the person who pokes them in the eye. So this goes directly at that quality of the conversation. If we want to create coaching type of relationships between our managers and our people, we need to bust up the roles. We need to rethink the way that those people are engaging in an ongoing conversation about career, about what's important to be working on, around progress against those goals. We need to completely change that dynamic. So it's no longer the person who knows it all and the person who sits and takes it. Because when we're in that dynamic, we will never have trust. Number 5, we are not machines. So there has been a raging debate for years about ratings. Now, it's kind of interesting to me that there's been a raging debate about it because ratings, if you look at the science, do not work. We cannot achieve fairness. What we're trying to do is mechanize human behavior, and to think that we can take a group of people doing different roles and assign them along a consistent continuum is kind of crazy. And also, each of us are our own raters. There's an element called the idiosyncratic effect. So if I was to rate Aisling as a 3.8, and don't get me started on decimal points, that rating is 60% about me, my scale, am I an easy grader, am I a hard grader, do I like the way she does things, does she do them my way? All these things tend to drive this bias in ratings. So what we have to let go of is this idea that by assigning a number, we've somehow created more clarity, because we haven't. We've actually lost clarity in that because we're making a lot of assumptions that we cannot make. The last one of "we are not Pavlov's dog" ties to this idea of rebooting rewards. And to fix this and to really move forward, we have to accept things like, we don't show up to work today thinking if I work a little bit harder, I'll get a 2% higher merit increase at the end of the year. My behavior isn't driven by that. I'm far more, once I've achieved a certain comfortable level of income, far more driven by intrinsic rewards. And I'm far more driven by things that are actually connected to the work I do, and I can relate to the fact that you see me and you see my contributions. So those are just a few of the fatal flaws to highlight. I'm going to I'll read this really quickly because I found this late in my research. This is Deming, and in the 80s he wrote this, and it in the end summarizes all 8 fatal flaws. I found it late in my work and I was like, oh my gosh, here he is. He's done it in one paragraph. But it says, the merit rating nourishes short-term performance, annihilates long-term planning, builds fear, demolishes teamwork, and nourishes rivalry in politics. It leaves people bitter, crushed, bruised, battered, desolate, despondent, dejected, feeling inferior, some even depressed, unfit for work for weeks after receipt of a rating, unable to comprehend why they are inferior. It is unfair. It ascribes to the people in a group differences that may be caused totally by the system they work in. That's another important thing that, we can't, if we pull someone out if they're a high performer in one system, we pull them out, drop them in another, they may no longer be a high performer. We cannot discount the system that we all work in. So let's take a quick poll. I know I didn't cover all of these, but I'm curious as you've read through them, if you were to pick 2 that you would like to leave behind. So if you're going to reboot and you say, we want to make sure we leave this behind. We don't want ratings anymore. We want to change the dynamic of the relationship. We want to focus more on the good work. What are your 2? Okay, the conversation, and that's the theme for today. No one's going to open up to the person who pokes me in the eye. And then let me introduce you to the competition, and we're not Pavlov's dog, and we are not machines. Yeah, a lot. This is what we see, organization to organization, that always ranges, but we're all trying to work away from a lot of these traditional elements that were designed into our old models. Once we understand what's broken, we need to think about what the shifts are that we want to move to. So if we have 8 flaws, we have to have 8 shifts. Highlighting just a couple of these. Number 2, give the steering wheel to our employees. This is all about truly putting the humans at the center of our process. It's their career, not your agenda. How do we help them grow? How do we change as HR our perspective of we're here to provide tools and insights and information to help lift people up and not to monitor and supervise? That's important, and it goes with number 3, changing our focus and really taking a future forward look at what can we understand from the past that will help us move into the future and be stronger and reach our potential in the future. Welcoming more people to the conversations. Number 5 is all about really starting to bring in peer thinking, which is one of the reasons I love the Tandem app, is how do we bring in a lot more peer conversations, because it's the peers who really know the work that we do, who really see us and can provide us the best insights into how we can get better and how we can leverage our strengths more. So those are just a few. Number 4, abandon uniformity. We tend to design performance management processes assuming that every role is the same. We just redesigned for one of the states in the US, and we had prison guards and doctors and forest agents. I mean, it was just like we couldn't create one solution for all of those people. You have to really at times abandon uniformity, create a red thread, and think about how you design a solution that works for all those people. So let's go to this poll, and then I've got a couple of points, and then Aisling, I'm thinking rather than deep into feedback, maybe we stop and take some questions here.
Sounds great, Tamra. Yeah.
So much to talk about. Not enough time.
Well, I'll let you finish off on the poll and then shout when you're ready for questions. And
All
a
right.
reminder to everybody that we would love to hear all of your questions and comments too. So just post them in the chat and we can respond to them as we go.
Yeah, I've got a couple more things I'll just hit at a highlight and then we'll open it. And I have stuff on feedback, but I want to make sure we have time to talk. All right, so which two of these do you want to take forward as you think about them? Let's see. Give the steering wheel to your employees and stop policing, start empowering. Love that one. And then strength across a lot of these others. Welcome more voices to the conversation. That's a good one. Open the door, transparency. When we do our performance management work, we always start with what we call the sketchbook, and we ask people what design principles they want. And number one is almost always create trust and transparency in the system. So I think that's a super, super important one to lean into. All right, so on the performance management topic, a few other tips and tricks. Number one is, if you're going to solve this, abandon the knotted solution. We need to pull it apart and really get clear on what it is we're trying to do and what mechanisms or approaches or processes or tools we're going to use to solve each of those. Despite the fact that we should be designing something that's very unique to our organization, we will always be solving these three common goals: developing people, rewarding equitably, and driving organization performance. So if you pick up my book, you'll see it's all anchored in this idea of these three common goals and really getting clear on how important each of those are for us, where we are today in our organization. And then finally, you really need to take a holistic look at this. And this is how we start to solve the rewards piece, is it has to be part of the puzzle. We have to look at each of these elements: how we set goals, how we give people insights, how we plan careers, how we coach them to be successful, how we make great talent decisions for our people, but for our organization to meet our needs, and how we address rewards and recognition in that. If we take a holistic solution to that, it starts to free us up to start to really think about how we can create kind of a portfolio of experiences that get us what we need, both for the humans in our organization as well as for the leaders and the business that we're trying to drive. So I'm going to stop there before we jump in to feedback, Aisling, and see what people want to talk about.
Okay, we have some questions coming in there, Tamra. So in how far are these results, insights, cross-cultural based on the research? Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, I would say they're mostly United States, European results for the most part. I have done work with companies in Southeast Asia and other parts of the U.S. And it's interesting, we had this conversation on a call last week. I think what's starting to happen is with the younger generations, we're starting to see a little more normalizing of some of the expectations of people in our organizations. So even in those cultures that were less willing to maybe be transparent with feedback or more direct, because we've got a bunch of digital natives out there around the world, and those digital natives have tools in their hands that are used to providing feedback and that's more on and current. I'm starting to see there is some greater willingness globally for all of these ideas because the younger generations are looking for them.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I'm seeing from the audience right now, unless I don't have full view, Meg. I know I have a heap of questions for you, but I want to let you finish before I jump in, because I'm like a kid in a candy shop here. I can't wait to ask you a whole host of questions. But let me let you finish off before we jump in.
Okay. So I'm just going to hit a little bit on feedback. Of course, our favorite topic, right, Aisling?
For sure.
When we were in, after I wrote the performance management book, of course, we're out doing a lot of work globally with clients in this space. And what we realized was we can't fix performance management if we don't fix feedback. And while every solution will be custom to the organization, every good solution addresses and creates a healthy culture of feedback. We also have seen research come out that has shown that when we've looked at all the solutions, and there's a great piece of research that CEO and I4CP did at the end of 2018, that if they looked at all the things we've done in the performance management space, what is it that's really, really driving an impact? What is it that is improving performance for our people and our organization? And it boiled down to this one thing: growth-oriented feedback. If we let go of all this and just said, we are just going to, like we've talked about, like you guys have said on this call, we're going to lean into improving conversations and creating a healthy culture of forward-looking feedback that helps our people grow, helps them achieve, helps them lean into their strengths, we would go a long way, and we'd probably save ourselves a lot of headaches in the way. But here's the problem. Feedback, like a lot of our other things, is broken. We think about it in a negative way. We try to quantify it: negative feedback, constructive feedback, positive feedback. We really have the definition wrong. We've learned a lot of bad habits that started at the playground, and we learned them from our siblings, and then we reinforce them with this traditional performance management process. So there's a lot of things about feedback that we've got wrong. So when someone comes at you with this statement, hey, I've got some feedback for you, usually the first thing that happens is, our fear goes up. We get into the sort of lock and load position and brace ourselves for what's coming at us, rather than really thinking of this as something that is part of an experience that is positive, and that we're open and not fear-based. And if you just took a moment, and if we just paused for a minute and thought about your own feedback story, it may be something that somebody told you that changed your life, that was very awakening and changed your life, or it may be something that 7 years later you still stew on every once in a while when you're sitting, you sit and think about something that someone told you. Feedback, our own experiences, really influence us, and if we're going to fix it, we have to kind of step back and understand our relationship with feedback, understand those elements, those moments that we've had that were really meaningful and what was good about them, and think about the things that have not worked or have triggered us, and why was that, and start to fix it. So we lay out a feedback fix in the second book. It's such an easy read, and there's a lot of good insights there on just tips and tricks and how do we fix this. But it has to start with a new definition. We need to disrupt the roles. We need to up trust and down level fear. And then we need to, focus on fairness, frequency, and focus. And we need to create a conversation model. So we offered the Connect model in there, which is exactly about improving the quality of the conversations that we have. So the definition we offer is clear and specific feedback that is sought or extended with the sole intention of helping individuals, groups, or relationships improve, grow, or advance. If we lean into this definition of feedback, we no longer have to say it's positive, it's constructive, it's negative. It's feedback, and it's feedback that is helping us grow, improve, or advance. That's all it's about. So if you're getting ready to offer somebody some feedback, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Does it meet the sniff test? Is it going to help this person grow? Is it about them, or is it about you? And so we need to lean into a new definition. We need to up level trust. I'm going to flip through these. We're going to disrupt the roles. So the most important thing is when we're in good feedback experiences, we're all playing the seeker, the receiver, and the extender. We're all in it. We're all playing those roles all of the time. We're disrupting the role in the sense that the extender no longer has the power. They're simply a witnesser and a noticer and offering up what they're seeing to others. And the seeker has the power, because if we put our energy into seeking, then we build trust. We seek what we need, what we want, from when we want it. And then when we do that, we're much more likely to take it in and do something with it. So we really need to change the way that we think about this and put the power in the hands of the seeker. We need to increase our fairness, focus, and frequency. Fairness has to be there for trust. Focus is about one thing. In the traditional performance reviews, we love to just dump on people. Here's your list of ups and downs, and everything gets lost, and we just leave remembering the one bad thing that somebody said. We need to be about one thing, small snacks of positivity and possibility. That's what we want to focus on. And the more we do it, the more frequently we engage in it, the better the quality of the feedback, the more insights that we can gather, and the more we mitigate bias and those types of things that show up in feedback. So I'll stop here. It's their future, not your agenda. Let's think about how we change performance management and how we fix feedback so we really can help people grow and really help them thrive and be their best and create a culture that is safe and healthy and fun to work in.
That's fantastic, Tamra. I love hearing you talk about this subject with such passion and energy. It's really, I could listen to you all day, but the questions are rolling here. So I'm going to jump straight to the questions because there's a lot to get through. One that's come up from a few people is about values. So I'm not going to pronounce your names right, so my apologies in advance, but Chamzitin is saying, how important is values in the performance management? And Olabimpi is also saying, how do we effectively integrate values behaviors into performance management? So maybe we just start there.
Well, I have an opinion on this that maybe isn't one that everyone loves. I think what we do wrong with values is when we put them in our traditional model and then we try to assess people against them, or we try to rape them, which is even worse. My concern here is, so for example, if integrity is a value, how am I assessing someone's integrity, and how do I have the right to assess Aisling on integrity? Now, if we lean into better feedback practices, we can start to say, these are our expectations for how we behave. This is our culture code. These are the values that we live by. And those can influence the conversation. So we can prompt our people during the performance reviews to have conversations about which is the value that I see you showing up with the most, right? And then someone can do some witnessing for someone and say, you know, I have noticed that you are so inclusive, and this is what I see you doing in meetings, pulling people into this conversation. That is a superpower. How do you do more of that? Or how do you demonstrate that for other people, right? So I think we can lean into our values. They can totally influence the conversations. They can establish those expectations we have, and we can talk about them. But I really would encourage people not to try to hard code them into their performance management process. Because even those organizations that do, after a while, you'll talk to everyone, they say, yeah, I answer the same every year on those 7 questions about values for that person, because we don't wildly change our behavior year to year, right? And so it's like, well, I've worked with that person for 10 years. So every time I answer that value question, I write exactly the same thing. It's not very helpful, and it just creates more noise in the system rather than focusing on what's the one thing about our values that I think you need to understand, that where you're having the greatest impact, or where you're maybe showing up in a way you don't realize. So
yeah. No, it's very true, and it's something a lot of our clients struggle with, because they want to bring values to life within the framework.
Well, and also the recognition, Aisling, you know, that's another great place, and Tandem has some great ways to do that, right? But also really thinking about how you recognize people who are living the values, right? And I'm a giant fan of gratitude and recognition. If you want to change your culture, go there. And, you know, if we start recognizing the people who are truly embodying and demonstrating and showing what it looks like to live our values, that moves the needle.
For sure. Okay, so Debbie's asking us, which organizations have rebooted their performance management and have been successful? And I think that's such a great question, because a lot of organizations are touted as having done radical things, and then the stories kind of slip out that maybe it wasn't all that effective in the end, and maybe they reversed some decisions and so on. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
No, it's really true. It's funny because back when Stacia was writing for Burson by Deloitte, they were looking for case studies, and I talked to her, this was years ago, and I said, you don't really have very many case studies where people have really done this completely the right way. And she kind of fessed up that no, they really didn't at that point, because what people were still doing is sort of fixing pieces of it, but not really addressing the whole. I think the story that came out early and still sustains is probably one of the best is Adobe, because what they did was, you know, step back and really leaned into readying managers. So they created a paperless process and empowered managers to make the right decisions. And they did a bucket of training and development for leaders to really develop those coaching skills and give them the confidence and the capabilities that they need. We did work, and I hope they don't mind me mentioning it, with Avanade, and their solution's beautiful in the end. And we came up with this idea early on about my story. So again, putting the employees really at the center of it, and using storytelling and people talking about, here's what I want my story to be at Avanade and how that will look. And then they custom build a lot of their tools that are, it's really an interesting experience there. Microsoft, is an interesting company because they went through this process, I think, 3, maybe 4 times with different leaders. And then once Satya came in, I think they've totally gotten it right. Microsoft was the quintessential stack ranking, really draconian kind of way that they did it. As they evolved, they kept trying to minimize it, and try to kind of tweak and tweak and tweak. And then they finally just stepped away as they were changing the culture to much more of a growth mindset. Like if you read anything about Satya, he's all about growth mindset. And so he really stepped into this idea of, they don't call it feedback, they call it perspectives, and giving people perspectives and leaning into this growth-minded, idea. So those are 3 that come to mind.
Yeah, I love that. And we've lots of client examples as well that we'd be happy to share in future conversations. But I love that the perspectives, and actually we have a comment here where they talk about, they've used the word insights. Sandor has shared with us, they use the word insights, and we have a client who did the same actually, and it completely changed the perception of feedback. Sometimes feedback is just a dirty word, as your book says.
I know. Yeah. And I write about that in the beginning of the book, that I actually, when I finished the performance management book, one of my last edits was I went through and tried to change the word feedback everywhere I could. I changed it to like insights or perspectives or point of view, or like I had like every, symptom you could come up with. And as we were out doing the work, what we realized is you can't, we use that word every day. Like we have to just change the definition, but it's a big lift. It's a really mentally, letting go of what we think about it and changing the way we experience it and think about it now.
Yeah. There's some incredible questions coming in, and I really hope I can get to as many of them as we can. But Donnie has asked us, to remove bias and subjectivity, is it more about culture change than the performance system?
Gosh, I think it's about both. That's a cheaty answer, right? But I think that, when I'm trying to minimize bias, the key actions I think to lean into are peer-based crowdsourcing methods. So you're hearing the voice of more than one person, because one person can never have all the answers. And the more that we bring voices in, the more that we do that. Secondly, eliminating ratings and those types of things really help, because that brings in a lot of bias. But that said, culture is so important, right? How we show up, what we care about, what we recognize, how we talk, all those things are so important too. So I don't know that I can untangle that one.
Yeah, the way I always think about it is performance management is the cornerstone, though, of your culture. It screams at the organization who you really are, because you can have values on a wall, you can talk, you can communicate all you like, but actually,
I agree.
How you treat people through, how you manage performance is a huge demonstration of who you fundamentally are at the core.
No, I agree. In the final section of the PM book, I speak just to that. It's about, if you're trying to change your culture, start here. Like this is, this is a great place to start.
Yeah. Damien, hi there. You have a great question. And this is one that I really want to tackle as well and get to, because I think it's one on a lot of people's minds. I have a question regarding the link with the reward aspect. How to measure contribution in a fair way that is not only based on the manager view in the end. Do we have a real life example in that regard?
I was waiting for that question. I knew someone was going to go there.
On a lot of people's minds.
Yeah. So when I talked about rewards, we need to reboot rewards as well. And what that means is, here's my perspective. So we coined a phrase: pay for capability, reward for contribution. Let me say that again: pay for capability, reward for contribution. So what this says is, if we let's take the capability side. If we get really clear on our job frameworks and our roles, and we map those to market, like we do anytime we go out and try to hire someone in, and we stay true to that market, then we can build fairness in around capability. Not only can we build fairness, we can start to build transparency, because we can say to our people, these jobs at these levels of skill get this type of pay range. You don't have to tell everybody who's paid what, but you can start to say, this is the pay range for these skills. And if you want more money, then you have to build these capabilities to get to this level. It starts to empower your people to make decisions about their own career, their own growth, their own skill development. So that's the pay for capability side. We need to move away from merit and lock in on the market and hold true to that. Then on the contribution side, I think we need to decide, what does that mean for our organization? And I've worked with clients who have done it a lot of different ways. I am a fan of taking what you are currently paying in bonus and rewards and all that outside of the base pay and thinking about that as a pool of money and then starting to sort it out into chunks. So probably some of it should go into a peer-based recognition system where people can recognize their peers with something that has a little bit of hook in it. Some of it should go to your managers that gives them the power to do spot bonuses, to do team recognition, to do the types of things that is very anchored to the work. We accomplished this goal, we're going to celebrate. We hit this milestone, we're going to recognize it. And then there's some level of probably company performance, and then you have to decide, does that get individualized or not? I've had several clients at this point that have started to move to the annual bonus becomes a company-wide thing. We rise or fall together. And so we start to think about, we rise and fall together. That's driving our teamwork, our collaboration. But then we also, throughout the year, take moments to recognize those people who are having an impact and contributing in meaningful ways. We can do that with the same amount of money, and we have a much greater influence on people's behaviors, because now I can say, look, I know I did X and I got Y. I think I'll do some more X, right? So it starts to really help us provide clarity to people about, how do you have an impact here and what do we value? And I see you having that impact.
Yeah.
Far more impactful than a big bonus at the end of the year that I can't really attribute why it was 2% higher than last year.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that as well, and people getting very creative, and particularly a move toward team recognition, that an awful lot more emphasis on rewarding the team as a unit, and then the outliers within that team, so the extreme top talent getting something that recognizes that. But I know McKinsey likes to talk about the 3 tiers, everybody's sort of in the middle, and then you kind of manage the ones who aren't delivering for you, and then you reward for the very, very top. So I think there's a lot of changed thinking in that space compared to this time a few years ago. I
totally agree, Aisling. And that can also, again, be validated through peer crowdsourcing, right? So when I was CEO at People Firm, that's what we did. We did the spot bonus where we could kind of recognize that at any point, but then we also did a quarterly, like who just really, who was those outliers that we want to recognize this quarter. And we crowdsourced that, and we were almost always right with who we thought, but we always checked it with the crowd, right? Have we forgotten somebody or we missed something? And the more you do that, the more trust you build, and you can take a lot of noise out of your system that way. Yeah. Oh, there are so many questions to get through, and I know we're fast running out of time, so let me try and speed up here. And of course, if we can't get to any of your questions today, we will follow up after the webinar and ensure everybody gets answered. Cheryl makes a very relevant point for these days. She says COVID's really impacted on people's confidence. Levels of patience has reduced, and people often feel defensive of their personal situations and the impact on their work. So how do you highlight elements of improvement while being sensitive to people's mental well-being at the moment? And well-being is such a topic, and I think you can't ignore it in the context of performance management, because actually performance management can have a greater impact on people's well-being or lack of when you don't get it right. Yeah, I've been pondering this a lot, and Aisling, I've been thinking a lot about this, the check-in. If you move towards frequent check-ins, what's in those conversations? And I almost see it like 3 Venn diagrams. One element is about the work. What are my goals? Am I making progress against the goals? One element is about my career and my growth, and help me understand how I can achieve my aspirations, whatever those are, if it's grow in place or, become the CEO. And the other one is well-being. And I think when we're doing check-ins, we have to be sort of first just starting with, are you okay? What's going on? And sometimes a check-in conversation may never get out of the well-being space because of just where we are right now. And I agree. I think, tempers are quick to fire and we're exhausted, right? This has been emotionally draining. And I think we just have to first be human and see how people are doing. And if we don't get to talking about progress against goals today, we'll do it next week or tomorrow or whatever, right? So yes, I think well-being has to be front and center. Always, especially now.
Agreed. You just brought up the topic of frequency there, Tamra. So and ask for Maria is thoughts on the frequency of reviews.
I think that, boy, that is so custom to the organization, and even within the organization, probably maybe tuned to the role or the maturity of the person in the role. I always joke that, that my daughter who's 25 and my father who's 75 and are both still in the workplace don't want to check in at the same rate. So, I think it needs to be adjusted. I like the idea of trying to do light one-on-ones on a really frequent basis, and that gives us the chance to just kind of stay aligned and keep making sure that we know where we're going and we're all good and we're busting through anything that's getting in the way. And then do more substantial sit down that's more about career and growth and those kind of conversations, probably at least quarterly. Some of my clients have struggled to have those heavier conversations 4 times. They've kind of gone to a 3-year sort of seasonal kind of conversation. But I think it also ties to, when are you making other talent decisions in the organization, right? How does it connect to your succession planning? How does it connect to your workforce planning? How does it connect to your learning, how you're assessing where you need to be taking your learning? So I think you also have to think about the broader talent management rhythm and what information do you need for that?
Yeah. I see Meg has appeared, and she only appears when she needs to tell us to stop. So over to you, Meg.
Unfortunately, I know, sorry, it is time, but I can see all the audience has stayed, so I'm sure everyone's enjoyed the session, and it was brilliant. So thank you very much, Tamra and Ashley.
Oh, thank you. Love being here.
Tamra, it's wonderful to have you here. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you to all of our audience as well. So our next session is on the 30th of March at 9 a.m. With thought leader and author Siobhan McHale. So hopefully another great session. And any questions we didn't get around to, as Aisling said, we'll be emailing you hopefully tomorrow with the answers. So hope you all have a great day. Thank you very much again, Tamra, and thanks all for joining. Bye-bye.